everything I see and everywhere I go. Every time you see, it's everyone I know. Ooh, let go, let go.
Hey, we've come a long way in our journey. And I'm looking at a lot of you guys out there. I see you. The healing has been healing. And now we're looking around at something altogether new. It's always another journey. It's always another challenge. And for years, we've been talking about Great Mother. Great Mother is the foundation of the Academy. The Mama Drama Trauma Healing Oracle deck. But today, it's just a preponderance of the message that the mother is speaking. And she's calling us home, and she's calling us into our rightful place. And I don't get a whole lot of clarity about that, especially, as I said, since we've been talking about it for so long. And if you're like me, and I know you are, as a mother wound empath, you need clarity. And although the signs and symbols are there, and although we may be feeling that it's time to compare notes and see what this voice that was once just in the wind is now saying all over the world, are we getting the same memo? Are we really understanding that this message is not just about the end of patriarchy and the rise of the feminine, but something much, much more? Are we getting the clarity that this is about connecting with our original selves? This is about recognizing individuation, separation is no longer serving us. This message, healing the mother wound, is the way back to matriarchy. Though you may not believe what you hear, listen. Even if you don't see your shine, glisten. We're about to enter remission, the opposite of a cancerous condition. We're multiplying, reclaiming feminine power from our spiritual genesis. This is for the mother wound empath, the awakening magician.
Let go the mother you dreamed, embrace the soul.
MDT does set you free when we are able to live in loving detachment from it. I want you to know that the journey back to matriarchy is about living in loving detachment. The downloaded Oracle deck Great Mother gave us in 2015, now 10 years old, was the blueprint for our return back to matriarchy. I understand this now more than ever because of the steps that have been proven over and over again to return me and many others back to a state of loving detachment from crises. Our first phase of the Mama Drama Trauma Academy was all about learning how to do that. We worked with the mythology of Dorothy Gale from The Wizard of Oz. And through the 7 scenes of that movie, the deck was divided, representing 36 gods and goddesses, 7 law cards, and 7 cards that spell the acronym ASPIRE. We aspire to live in loving detachment. It's a difficult thing for us to do. In fact, it has been eons since we have been in our rightful place and in our natural order as women empaths in our community. Historically, we have been viewed with great honor. And over the eons, this has been torn down to such a degree that we've been inculcated by our very own maternal bloodline to let go of that great inheritance, that ancestry. But as we've also learned in phase 1, in order to live in loving detachment, we have to let go of shame, blame, and guilt of ourselves and from others. So there is no shame, blame, and guilt with this. New series beginning today with phase 2, focusing on trigger management. We do not hold on or cling to or want to be identified with being mother wound empaths. Far from it. We simply are acknowledging, in Aspire, that this is a wound that we must constantly and through the duration of our lives tend to, as lovingly and as nourishingly as we did others in previous lifetimes as prophetess and priestess. We've had many podcasts about empaths being old souls. In fact, many of us did live during those eons ago. So what we're talking about here is, on the face of it, we are still in our healing journey. We've made great progress. But now, since the majority of us have done such outstanding inner work, we have been so focused on healing our wounds, our self-inquiry, the S in Aspire. We have taken responsibility in processing our emotions. We've learned with the I in Aspire how truthful it is to tell ourselves the truth first. And the R in rebirth and resurrection having to do with taking our power back in everyday simple deeds, such as simply considering ourselves first and using our empathy to serve ourselves first in order to experience emancipation. Of course, this doesn't all happen in a linear process. It's a day-to-day, experiential endeavor. In the time we have today, we want to focus on who Great Mother is calling home to matriarchy. In unearthing this ancestral mother, we recognize that there is a great calling, and the calling is different for each of us. All women are up in arms all around the world about this calling. We are concerned here about what the calling is for us. And as empaths, the calling from Great Mother needs to be understood within the context of the leadership of matriarchy. The very thing we have shied away from, the very thing we did not want to be called to do, the very thing that terrifies us most. Yes, we were the leaders, and if we are to return to a healthy relationship with other women, we must also reclaim our position. Did you know matriarchy was central to the spiritual governance of prehistorical society? You know, society before his story, before land ownership, militarization, statehood, and centralized power. There were land rights, communal responsibility, spiritual states of individual and communal power. Imagine our first mothers and the matriarchal societies they were born in, gave their lives to, and perpetuated through their progeny, raised their children to honor the Great Mother. Do you remember your origin story? Your first mother's story? What we reclaim today is whatever that is for you in your heart, in your spirit, in your knowing. We have reincarnated so many times. The present form that we take does not dictate that lineage. Let me say that again. As old souls, we have reincarnated so many times. The present form we are currently in, as in the DNA that we carry, does not dictate the lineage that we most identify with matrilineally. That is something for our heart to determine. And so much of the message that is here for us is about our hearts and all the work we've been doing to connect with it, to have authentic messaging from it, to act on that messaging with courage, to test it, to determine our intuitive powers, to determine the energetic exchange we're willing to give and we're willing to receive, and what that takes for us to do that for any situation is what this has all come to during this age of chaos. And what Great Mother's message is to us during this period of chaos is to congratulate us on our work and to let us know that during this period right now, that work is the foundation for our preparation for the post-chaos era. It may seem like a long time away or that it won't even come. But rest assured, like every other epoch and every other eon Great Mother has been in and lives within us, it shall be. And we need to be prepared. What she's saying to us is, for you, I know I have expressed my lineage, and I will continue to teach from it. But she wants me to let you know, regardless of who you are or what maternal lineage you connect with that. Have daily dialogue with that, divine dialogue. And by divine dialogue, she simply means, as she teaches in the Oracle deck, for us as dearly loved divine children, and our mantra that emphasizes this teaching, in which we should repeat to ourselves all the time. And I forget to do it at on the podcast sometimes because it's just so much a part of me and of my thinking. Repetition is the mother of skill. Repetition is the mother of skill. The mantra, I am a dearly loved divine child of the great Mother, Father, God, is the foundation of our divinity identity. I am a dearly loved divine child of the great Mother, Father, God, who is never judged, condemned, or left alone. This is the foundational core teaching. If we don't get anything else from Great Mother, she wants us to know we are dearly loved, divine children of the great Mother, Father, God, who are never judged, condemned, or left alone. What does it mean to be divine? Well, it means three essential things. So everything goes back to the foundation. I am a dearly loved divine child of the great Mother, Father, God, who is one, never judged, never condemned, or left alone. To clock that divinity, we need to be very much aware of our responsibilities with regard to that divinity, that we always remember it as a privilege and our birthright to be happy, healthy, and whole. That is our birthright. What we have to always remember is that though we are dearly loved divine children, we are living in a three-dimensional world. When we go back to the origin of Great Mother and Great Mother worship, it is a highly spiritual worship associated with the element of water. I have narrated the Mami Wata volume series by Mama Zogbe, Amengazi, Vivian Hunter Hindrew on the YouTube Great Mother Speaks channel. So you can listen to that and learn about the history of Mami Wata as well as the Sibyls. I narrated that there as well. But this foundational understanding of our divinity and how it connects with our earth experience is paramount to owning and understanding our relationship to our ancestral mother is a birthright. Truly, her blood does run through our veins. There's so many of them. Which one we identify in this lifetime, that's why it's our choice. It's so many as an empath. That's how old so many of us are. There's a lot of focus on how we are as empaths with regard to feeling emotionally overwhelmed and having challenges with subtle energies. And we have this issue with self-worth and resistance to standing out and unexplained fears of our spiritual power and clairvoyant gifts and guilt around being highly sensitive because that's hard for other people. You know, all of that to me sounds a lot like somebody who's really, really old. And that's why they kind of stay to themselves, because it's just easier to do that. And that's why Great Mother is speaking to us right now, is that we have been able to get into this comfort zone, especially those of us who have been doing a lot of healing work. And she wants to shock us out of it during this period of chaos, not for us to feel a disruptive sense of security or fear. It's not what this is about, as it is never about that with Great Mother, ever. We have a birthright to be happy, healthy, and whole. It's about being prepared for post-chaos. But it doesn't feel that way. And so she wants us to know that within the responsibility, the privilege, and the rights of our divinity, we still are experiencing the pain of this present phase of chaos. As empaths, unfortunately, we feel it doubly because we do absorb so much. So that practice, and whatever practice you use, many of us here use the supplemental material of the Mama Drama Trauma Healing Oracle deck to get us right back into that loving detachment. Not detachment with anger, with rage, or with just being numb, but a loving detachment. Accepting what is with love is so important right now, because what we're needing to do is distinguish between pain and punishment. It feels like punishment because our mothers, who we can't yet individually name, there's a lot of archaeological research and resources that we have available to us now, and that is just coming out daily now, including things that have been known for centuries that have been how can you say? I mean, just concealed. A lot of information has just simply been concealed because it did not serve the white patriarchal narrative. And all of this stuff is being revealed right now. That's what a lot of the fear is about, is what are we going to do with this information? And it's out of the bag now with AI, which, by the way, has been very helpful with my research and the issues and the fears that people have about that. I've been trained about research and cross checking references and all that kind of stuff. And so it's just a fast library, to me. And everything still has to be checked. And I still read the hardcover books and make sure that their interpretation of them is right as well. Of course, I don't do that on everything, but I want you to know that I do use AI to help with the research. And a lot of it has been confirmed what I have already been sharing these previous episodes, actually. So if you can, imagine a society where mothers were seen as direct conduits to the divine. Direct conduits. What was lost when that perception shifted? If you can imagine that, they stood in this understanding that pain is not punishment, but simply proof of the divine. Any pain was seen as proof of the divine. It was seen as a directive to pivot from the direction you were going energetically. Everything was energy. Everything was a thought. Everything was an emotion before there was an action. Everything was highly regimented in terms of behavior, because all of the things that we take for granted now, that's why I say imagine. Imagine there being no electricity. Imagine there being no vehicles. Imagine there being homes made of natural materials only. Imagine there being water only available to you if you dug a well or you walked to it. Imagine you weaving all of your clothes if you wore any at all. Imagine the food that you ate was food that was naturally and organically and wildly grown around you, unless and until only about 15,000 years ago, there was overwhelming civilization. That's still a footnote as well, because up until about a year ago, we were still thinking the oldest humans were only about 250,000 years old. 3 months ago, it went up to 300,000, and now they're talking about 1 million years human beings have been here. This is what I'm talking about in terms of this information being released, and by reputable archaeological sources. So we really have to recalibrate and recalculate a lot of what's going on. But this is what we do know, is that pre-dynastic, meaning before patriarchal kingship, the sites of matriarchal power, so we're talking 4,000 BC and before. So when you're talking about the full scheme of things, that's what I'm saying. We were the rulership until relative recent times. These sites of matriarchal power that have been proven to be so around this 4,000 BC era up until about 3,100 BC, and obviously before, Nabta Playa, southern Egypt, Nubia, where they have the megalithic ceremonial site aligned with Sirius, the star of Isis, evidence of female-led ritual and astronomical knowledge. Can't forget about Dendera. Taseti, land of the bow, that's also Nubia Kush, considered by many African scholars as the first kingdom predating dynastic Egypt, known for women in ritual leadership and female warrior presence. Merimdi, Badari, and Nakada cultures, pre-dynastic Egypt, rich in female figurines, matrifocal burial patterns. So the burial was matrifocal, and water-based goddess symbols, Afro-Asiatic Saharan traditions. Long before the desertification of the Sahara, this region supported advanced civilizations centered on water priestess cults, serpent symbolism, and fertility goddesses. The Mamiwata lineage likely originates here, connected to ancestral water veneration. So there we have the serpent in the Bible, which we will cover the patriarchal usurpation of the matriarchy in successive sessions. Now, when we look at this and how this is all likely to all begin before the Menes unification of Upper and Lower Egypt and continuing waves across millennia, this patriarchal, these waves of control and usurpation of the matriarchy, it's all about the suppression of feminine spiritual authority. And there's a specific reason why that had to be suppressed according to the patriarchy. This rise of centralized kingships and male priesthoods, as opposed to the predominant feminine priesthoods, and the decline in communal water-based, womb-centered ritual systems were all this strategic purpose that we're seeing played out even today. So where did these cultures and these civilizations go? Well, they fled from Kemet, which is ancient Egypt. The name Egypt didn't come about until the establishment of Greek civilization some 3,000 years later. Ancient Kemet or Nubia, when these dynasties started to emerge, these Mamiwata traditions fled west in present-day Nigeria, Benin, Ghana, Togo, etc. And the traditions are still practiced today for emotional healing, water rituals, divinations, and spiritual possession, except they too are predominantly patriarchal. And so this is what Great Mother wants us to understand, how deep this wounding goes. This wounding is a global wounding, it's a political wounding, it's an economic, it's an ecological, it's a spiritual wounding. And when we talk about the migration of the priestesses and the prophets to places of safety, or even the diaspora through slavery, which also happened in waves. We get the narrative that there was just one period from the 15 to 1800s that was, wow, African American slavery, and there was slavery before that. We have histories about the Slavs and within Africa and Arabia and that sort of thing. But even within the narrative of slavery, they just give these slates of time, when actually these waves are continuous, as we see with child slavery today. And so why was it so imperative that they were gotten rid of? Why was it so important that there was a shift? Well, we want to first talk about the roles that we played. We were the dream interpreters, the rainmakers, the birth guardians, the death midwives, as well as the birth guardians and midwives. We were keepers of the lunar calendars, harvest cycles, the menstrual cycles, unification of the feminine physically, emotionally, spiritually. We conducted the rites of passage, the initiations into the custodianship of Ma'at. Ma'at, of course, being the 42 laws of Kemet under the Neteru. Laws that are 42 things a divine soul that has lived in physical form can say before he walks into death. Okay, this is during the time when people knew when they were going to die. Before they walked into death, oftentimes they would walk off and just leave the village. Okay? And they would be able to say each of the 42 things what they did not do. I did not steal. I did not cause harm to another. I did not speak ill of another. Those are the laws of Ma'at and the initiation into Ma'at. Okay? We were the living moral compasses. So when you want to talk about the depths of our sensitivity and why it is, we so often, through the trauma, are just trying to survive through that. We do not see the power of it and how it is properly applied. It's properly applied to what works. And what works are the laws of Ma'at. What works are the ancient traditions that sustained us for millennia. Patriarchy can't even keep a civilization going for more than 500 years. Can't even keep a system going at most 1,000. And we see the Western European monarchies not being able to make that. So I think when we talk about what does and what does not work, and we're talking about the basic meaning of the proof of the divine is in what works, not the theory, but the praxis. Okay, so the context for the pretext of divinity is based on experience. It's based on the value system of divinity, not philosophy. This is not philosophy. Patriarchy deals with philosophy. This deals with a living contract, a living moral compass, how you actually live your life. That's what matriarch was based on, how you live your life, not how you pretending to act at church and with folks you go to church with, and this is how we say, and this, that. No, this is how we actually do it. This is how we actually do it. So as warriors of womb sovereignty, it was through the feminine bloodline that our children were named, protecting sacred sexuality from misuse. And so when we talk about things like sacred prostitution and things like that, the connection we had with cosmology and the connection we had with astronomy and understanding the soul of a person when they were born and the placement of the cosmos when they were born and what needed to happen in relationship to that soul and the community. There was a lot of planning going on with children and with bloodlines. Things that it took patriarchal science millennia to figure out, such as diversity of the bloodline increases intelligence. So we can talk about, sacred sexuality when we talk about the papal usurpation, because that was a big deal, of course, for the Catholic Church and how they misrepresented that. So how this relates to empaths today who still feel emotional guilt for being too much for people living in this world when we are on the complete other end of the continuum now, who don't get us, and so therefore we don't get ourselves. We're not in that world. We're in this one on the other end of the continuum. And living with a fear of this intuitive power, wanting to act on it, wanting to live by it, but nothing else is supporting or reinforcing that, except, of course, MDT Academy, and having the confusion of being symbolically honored, but emotionally invisible. So, yes, there's an emerging sense of the importance of empaths and what we have to offer in our daily lives to people in relationships and our insights and the work that we do in healing, but we still have this emotional invisibility and an inability to relate to one another. And I attribute the lack of communication in the comments and on social media to that. People just, empaths, I've been working with empaths long enough to know that for whatever reason you don't do that, but you guys are healing now, and I'm expecting to have some dialogue with you. I want to hear your stories. I want to hear your perceptions, because as a goddess, When you are not heard and you slink back into this comfort zone, you're not going to be able to fully express your gifts, talents, and abilities, which is a part of your birthright. It's a part of you feeling happy, healthy, and whole. It's sharing what you came here to share and what you came here to give the world. So no, there may not be a long list of names that we have currently for our first mothers, but there is a long river of memory, and it's in us. Every time you cry for no reason, feel grief in a temple ruin, or dream of water you've never touched, you're touching her. I remember before I moved to Florida, I was having these dreams. I'm born in the Midwest, and I'm having these dreams about water and palm trees. I was touching her. The one who left when her voice was taken. The one who sang when the Nile still flowed through wombs. The one whose name may be gone, but whose breath is now yours. That's the lineage. That's the lineage. It felt like she left. We didn't see her through the five senses, and we've been conditioned and trained by patriarchy that that's the only thing that matters. But as empaths, you don't have a choice but to know it's not. Her voice was never taken. It was instilled even deeper and deeper into us. But it was difficult to distinguish it from the trauma of believing we had been abandoned. So the records are scarce, and we're not imagining that she's been erased from time. We're not imagining that the historical records of our matriarchal spiritual leadership from this era is elusive. It is, because pre-dynastic culture was oral. It's not carved in stone. So we can see that the scribes and the papyrus and the cuneiform and all of that through Samaria came out summarily after our matriarchal communities were destroyed, because that's very important to patriarchy. See, we have a whole different way of recording and coding our information. This is an oral class, for example. Our textbook is an oracle deck. We have a different way of conceiving, perceiving, and transmitting information. Much of what we know about the early Nile and other matriarchal societies comes from graves, pottery, and ritual rites, not inscriptions. Women's names and all that kind of stuff. They were recording ritual story so we wouldn't forget we were divine. So we wouldn't forget that pain is not punishment, but proof of God, and how to identify God through the signs and symbols of their ritual sites. It was not pharaonic monumental inscriptions that centered the king, that centered the queen. That's not how we roll. The earliest spiritual systems were communal and fluid. Leadership was not always attached to the individual ego, which is killing us now. Why we can't stand together as sisters and support each other. How are we going to survive the chaos to even get to post-chaos if we don't heal enough to at least love one another, support one another? It's not about centralized power with us. And so that's why she wants us to unlearn. She wants us to realize what has happened. We have been so focused on the centralized power that's the antithesis of our nature. It makes us untrusting. This made our roles sacred, but not self-promotional, okay? And so it doesn't translate in the modern historical tracking and thinking. So we need to establish that first. And use that foundation to understand how this era of his story birthed the mother wound. Let that sink in. So based on the little generality that I've given so far, and there's a lot more about us coming during this period, it was the usurpation of our divine power through the era of his story that birthed the mother wound. Now, here's why. When Menes and other leaders around the world, male leaders, but to use the example of Menes, the pharaoh who unified Upper and Lower Kemet, he also began the ritual subordination of women's spiritual authority as he did that. So the maternal emotional truth was displaced by ritual obedience. Okay, and that's how we get the piety and the following the rules in the church. Notice the law of Maya, that's before you died. You didn't get to stick your chest out and act like you did something until you're about to die, and you lived your whole life right. So this political conformity and male intermediation with the divine is a defilement that seeded the mother wound. And this loss of spiritual authority, now this is the empaths' mother wound. The spiritual authority rested with us as the empaths who were connected. We were connected to the divine. We were the first sacerdotal power of prophetess priestess that was known as prophetess priestess on behalf of the divine. And so what this meant in terms of this profound spiritual and societal authority was that as direct conduits to the divine, when we lost this and the perception shifted, this ancestral memory that we had carried for eons became twisted because it was no longer respected, it was no longer taught, it was demonized, it was made to be taboo. And this wound manifested in the mother-daughter relationship because the mother, remember, supported the matriarchy, gave her life to it, and raised her progeny to do the same. Now, what are you supposed to do? The best thing you can do is survive the destruction. As the head of these societies, as the empath and the empress of these societies, we have never reconciled this divine sensitivity and sacred power with the experience we've had since the usurpation, since the loss of our sacerdotal power. We have not had a reconciliation. The empath's experience of emotional dysregulation to the historical suppression of this lineage that traditionally embraced spiritual sensitivity and intuitive knowing has just been lost. There has been attempts to maintain it, but only at the cost of deepened trauma and the sole benefit not the material benefit, not as a human being and this life form where you get something for it, but on a soul level, still continuing to practice it despite the taboo, still continuing to practice it when they call it black magic and they call it this horrible voodoo and they called it all of these things, which was your very connection to God. You were killed. You were crucified. You were enslaved. The catacombs of Rome, all of that was Mami Wata, Mami Isis, cult, pagans. We've been relegated to being the worst of the worst of the worst. And the women who are being called by Great Mother, who do not have this lineage, who have not had this soul experience, cannot understand it, are talking a lot of whoopity whoop, goobly goop, that doesn't make any sense because we are not in position to reclaim our throne. It doesn't mean the same thing as it means in patriarchy. Doesn't mean that there's going to be just one leader. Our leadership is communal. So this lost perception of our mothers as being the direct conduits to the divine is the unqualified assumption she is now above repute within the patriarchal Christian Islamic Judeo belief system. So instead of being a direct conduit to the divine, because she follows the patriarchic system, she's above repute. Now, this is deepening the wound because it blocks any type of authentic, let alone divine connection we can have to one another, mother to daughter. How many generations has this gone on? The ancestral memory of spiritual sensitivity was used, and intuitive knowing has been increasingly repressed as the mother wound replaced it. It's normalized. That's why it's not treated as a serious condition, as it would have been during the days of matriarchy. It would have been it would have been like a triage situation. Somebody would have been quarantined for several years, if not a lifetime, for exhibiting any type of behavior that we have normalized as the mother wound. We wouldn't allow that type of infestation. That's why we are so offended by it. And other people are like, well, what are you talking about? Yeah, again, they talk goobly goop about it, but as far as the deep connection to the pain and the need for it to be relieved, on a soul level, we know we should not be experiencing it as a divine child. Now, the question is, if ancient mothers were revered as oracles and priestesses, how might modern empathic abilities be a distorted echo of that innate power? How is our empathic ability being used in a distorted way? Self-harm, self-hate, self-ingratiation, always turning down compliments and that sort of thing. So how can empaths transform mama drama trauma into empowered ancestral wisdom? Well, we're doing it. We're doing it here, and with this segment in just the general exploration of how these matrifocal cultures, the Neolithic Europe, the Catahoyek, the Minoan Crete, where women served as spiritual mediators, dreamers, healers. We're looking at how the priestess was emphasized as not just a role, but a collective female frequency. I experienced this when I was in Africa, and I've played some of this music in the background without explaining it. Everything comes in its time. But I recorded music of a spiritual ceremony where the women were dancing in such a synchronized rhythm that the bells on their ankles played a very ethereal song. And after what had to be hours of this playing and watching, I call it playing, but they were actually jumping and dancing, and these bell anklets were ringing and playing this beautiful music with these drums. As they danced, it was a witch doctor ceremony in Kenya. And it was way back in the day. So much has changed in Africa. But I'm so glad I was able to go during that time. And I remember when she crossed over, that means the ancestor handed her the initiation. The other dancers stopped, and she was just in a frenzy. And you could not hear the bells. I could not hear the bells. I could see them in the full moonlight and the fire that she was dancing around, but I could not hear the bells. They stopped. And so this collective feminine frequency is real. It's an intuitive, cyclical, emotionally attuned energy. They knew when to stop through their own initiatory training of the connection they had with her. And so it's not about this role of who's going to lead and who's going to be the star in the middle of the stage. No. It's about who's going to be a vessel for the needs of our community. Who's going to get the clearest message and communicate it most clearly from the divine on behalf of all of us? And how is my gifting going to interact with that gifting? It's bringing up all kinds of questions. What did it mean for a woman to be the spiritual authority of a community? What did that really mean? We can make assumptions, but based on the evidence, based on what we know and how they lived in traditions that still exist, and there are 3 traditions, matrifocal traditions in the world that still exist uninterrupted. There are 3 of them. It begs the question, how was emotional and intuitive labor once seen as sacred? How was it seen as sacred? In other words, was it really all about the divine connection to the spirit mother and the spirit father and being in that space all the time? But we know that as human beings, we human being. And was it a space for there to be human? Because it sounds really highfalutin. And I think it does because Great Mother wants us to focus on the empath. And that's how we use our natural abilities every day. But the question still begs itself, what happens when generations forget this reverence? How do we resolve this confusion? And so I want us to connect with that matrilineal ancestor that we feel closest to, that community of women. What culture is it for you? what patterns of matrilineality and what rhythms, what music, what song, what scents, what spices, what climate, what ecology, what cosmic harmony do you hear? What area are you called to? Because we know colonialism has erased these systems, but our memory persists. Our spiritual memory persists. And we want to locate our cultural and spiritual lineage. We want to, if not know it exactly, use our empathy for our benefit. What feels the happiest? What feels the healthiest? What makes us feel most whole, most holy when we think about it? Where is that connection? Because when we journey into the rhythms of matrifocal societies that built the world before patriarchy, before colonization, before militarization and empire, we can refer to three that still exist on the planet since these times. The San of South Africa, the Moon Blood Dance and First Law clans, women as the first cosmologists, menstruation and moon cycles as timekeepers. Their daily life is still gathering in sacred circle, trance dances led by elder women, and blood rites around the eland. The female body as cosmos. They believe the body is the cosmos of the nebula as birth, dreaming as the Milky Way, and death cycles held by women as the vortex. When we look at the oral histories from San elders and anthropology from indigenous rights-based scholars like Credu Mutwa, we see how this ancient matrifocal culture is the first law, as its name says. Another one are the Dogon star women, the original star women. That group of people that identified Sirius long before people even knew there was an Orion or Sirius, including ancient Kemet. These societies go back. They are the daughters of Yasaki and Sirius. Yasaki, the first woman bearer of beer, dance, and sacred story. Her daily responsibilities woven with cosmic duties, these women are keepers of Siji knowledge. This is a knowledge that is based on the stars. Twin energies and the feminine-masculine balance embodied in agriculture, sex, and craft, all the way back to Amma and the Numo. When you study sources like Amadou Hampé-Teba, Marcel Grill, and the Dogon cosmologist, you see how these are truly the star women of the planet. And the third matrifocal group that is still in existence today are the Sanatana Shakti, wombs of time and elemental law. They are the Aditi and the womb of the universe, Shakti as the original mover. Temple life, midwifery, yoga, and Ayurveda, all rooted in women's spiritual authority. Their daily rituals in India consist of feeding the elders, honoring rivers, and observing the moon's rhythm, which is what Vedic astrology is based on, which is what the oracle deck is based on with its lunar images. All of these things downloaded to me years before I could explain or understand them as concisely as I do now. So when you look at the, I want to say Sanskrit, I want to say the ancient Indian, this isn't Hindu, this is Vedic. It's way before the Hindu. And so when you study the Devi Mahatmya or Kamala Subramaniam, the Devdutt Patanayak, where culturally appropriate, you can understand that these are female gurus in the Shakta tradition. So when we see this and we understand that this is real, and there are many other matrilineal societies that, you will find, I would say there are about 6 more of them. You have the Sky Woman's Garden, the Haudenosaunee Matrilineal Nation. These are also Sky Women. They haven't been consistent throughout the ages as the others, but they exist. You have the Changing Woman and the Sacred Harmony of the Dene people. You have the Papahana Numoko, the land-bearing mother of Hawaii. Okay. You have the Wawalag sisters, songlines, and the womb of the world. These women are all matriarchal in how they live and how they organize their societies. The Namu of Sumer, sea womb of civilization. So they are still here and inspiring, and diversely emotionally wounded empathic women need, what Great Mother is saying is that we need to understand our ancestral wound, reconnect with our ancestral mother so that we can trust again in order to assist and co-create a healing-centered vision that bridges between ancestral memory and is rooted in woman-first cultures. Not the way they were then, but the way that they need to be now for us with a trauma-informed practice. They didn't have the experience that we've had. We have a whole new wisdom set, a whole new knowledge set, a whole new emotional set. And this helps us in our challenge to live in harmony with this feminine wisdom that built civilizations. But it is also our challenge. And if you are here and ready to face it, I am here for you to deconstruct this mother wound that blocks our ability to live up to this responsibility before us, so that we can effectively become them, the wise healers we are meant to be for ourselves and others as us. With the breadth of experience that we've had, there's a blessing in it. Pain is not punishment. It's proof of the divine's instruction for us to pivot our focus. And we've been focused on this wound. So what we want to do is continue our understanding of our particular role as mother goddesses and priestesses within the context of our practical warrior queen spiritual leader lives. Okay, that's what we refer to them now. But remember, we're also using the language of the patriarchy. What languages did we speak? We didn't even describe things the same way. Okay. And so these things trigger a lot of different things in us. And so as we move into the second phase of the academy with trigger management, we want to be ever aware of our deconstructing mission of this mother wounding through patriarchy as well. This is all our work to do. It's not about shaming, blaming, or guilting the masculine at all. And we're going to get all into that. From the Nile Valley and beyond, these legacies that have been suppressed and distorted. These women didn't just exist. They fought wars, led revolts, upheld spiritual traditions, and were the custodians of Ma'at long before and long after patriarchy tried to eclipse them. So to fully understand how this monotheistic revolution erased matriarchal spiritual authority, we must see the demotion of Ma'at, the Netaru, which we'll talk about, the Netaru, the feminine ancient gods of Kemet. This demotion didn't simply create a theological shift. It was a final blow in a long campaign to centralize divine power. That's why we were warriors. That's why we were Amazons. The Amazons were protecting the oracles and the temples of Ionia, what we call Greece now, in Asia Minor. The Sibyls went up there and set that stuff up, trying to run away from these crazy Kemetic pharaohs who usurped the power here. Yes, Africans were the first, and they were the first patriarchs, the first of everything. Good, bad, right, good, wrong, indifferent. Okay? So we're going to get clear on all of this because Great Mother wants us to understand how this campaign against her divine will and power into the hands of the patriarch served it from our feminine ancestral lineage. We have powered it. She wants us to understand this power, this process, how it occurred, and next time we'll walk through this transparently as we go the next step into this usurpation and go step by step through how this power was redirected to support the patriarchy. How the empaths and spiritual leaders need to trace this maternal wound through this series that we're doing now in this second phase of trigger management. All this information is about the narratives and the chaotic experiences that we're having and that are being forced upon us now that are all driven by this wound. So we can begin the deeper healing right at the root. Okay? We're about to pull this root up and we're about to reseed ourselves, replant ourselves as we've been supplanted to support this suppression created by this first wound. So I want you to just kind of take that in, listen to it again if you have to. It's foundational in terms of Great Mother's message to us and what she really wants us to know about why she's coming through so strongly right now, especially to us as empaths. How she wants us to redirect the painful feelings that we still have. We've done a lot of good work with loving detachment. But since this is such a deep wound, an ancestral wound, in fact, we are moving into the trigger management. And she wants us to know the root of these triggers being that foundational mother wound. And as empaths who have been previously the heads of matriarchal communities, she needs us to know it's time to prepare for a post-chaos world. In the meantime, and in between time, for our next time, remember, Great Mother loves you, and I do too.
Let go the mother you dreamed. Embrace the soul. Inspire from root to crown.